Welcome. We are here. I'm very happy to host and stay here this morning with Ben Haggard from Regenesis Group. He is with us today, and thank you, Ben, and welcome to my class and to this chat today.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Ben Haggard, with Pamela Meng, is the author of this wonderful book that is Regenerative Development and Design. And we would like to talk about this book with you and my audience and my students. And if you can introduce us a little bit about how was this journey of writing this book from all these years of study and working and projects that you are involved in different cities and countries, because you also work a little bit in Mexico. We meet in Mexico. We would like to listen from you about this experience, the story behind the book.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to. Well, maybe I'll start by saying why we created Regenesis, because my background was in ecological design and planning. And after some years of doing that work, I became very frustrated because I began to realize that designing a really good project, could be a building or a village or a farm, whatever it was, that it wasn't enough, right? That if you're really doing ecological design, you're creating things that are dynamic and evolving and changing. And as a rule, the client systems weren't prepared to evolve and change with what we were creating. So we realized we needed to come up with a very different approach, very different theory, and that's when we started Regenesis. And a lot of our work has been on connecting design, and the creation of projects to the development of people's thinking in the communities that we're working on, developing the thinking of our clients, developing the thinking of the people who are going to use these projects, and developing thinking in the community about what it means to be alive and evolving, continually regenerating. So that's really how it started. And after many years of practicing and developing the theory, we wrote the book as a way of getting it out of this kind of intuitive understanding we had and being able to talk about it really directly and explicitly. And you'll notice that the book is divided into three basic sections, right? So the first section is, okay, what kind of projects do we need? We want to do something regenerative. What kind of projects do we need to create? Well, they need to, transform the way we live with ecological systems and transform the way we live with one another. Okay, that's the kind of project it is. But if we're going to get that kind of project, we need to have a completely different nature of process than the one that we've all learned in school, right? So what kind of process is it? And we sort of unpacked that. And then we said, okay, but if we're going to engage in a completely different nature of process than the one that's practiced everywhere in the world to create completely different projects, we're going to have to change ourselves as well. And that's what that last section in the book is about. So that's the underlying structure, right? You have to grow yourself to be able to grow the way that you work, to be able to deliver a completely result in the world.
Yeah, and the chapter 2 is about understanding the place. As an urbanist and architect, sometimes in school, we didn't learn about how to really understand the place in deep. We don't really learn a lot about the basic of ecology, the layers that are underneath, the topography, the water systems, the ecological systems that are happening even in the earth. So I think the chapter 2 for me is fascinating in the way that you present how as a humans we can become partners with the planet. Instead of destroying and developing and extracting resources, It's more to understand our role in the planet, to be able and be sensible enough to understand what's going on there, what's going on in the system, in the planet, in the habitat, and then be able to read it in order to understand what are the actions that we need to do and the design that we need to do in correlation, in harmony, in holistic approach, in dance with the current system. And could you go further with this chapter?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of small things about it. So the way I think about it, I hold it in different dimensions. So on one level, there's just understanding how it works, how a place works. Yeah. And again, even at that level, we're not very good at it, as you're saying. There are all these layers, right? The geology and the ancient history and the recent history and the ecological dynamics and the water and the way it all, and the economy, how all of that is one integrated whole, right? We study them as though they were completely different disciplines, but actually they're all aspects of one integrated whole, which is a socio-ecological system, right? So that's the entry point
Yeah.
for beginning to understand a place. But it's not the end point, because once I understand how it works, I still don't necessarily understand who it is, right? So, and that's kind of behind this idea of partnering with place, dance partner, or learning to really work with someone or something, is to know more than just what it does and how it works, but actually understand what is its character, what is its nature.
Yes.
And so we ask a completely different set of questions when we're trying to understand that. When we're trying to understand not what is a place and how does it work, but who is it, right? What is its nature? What is its essence, right? Why do I love my place? Right? What am I loving? What's creating that connection? It's a completely different part of who we are, connecting to a completely different aspect of what it is. Yeah. And then the third piece that I talk about, which is connected to that, is there's once I have a sense of how it is, how it really works as a system and how to relate to it, then there's a third piece, which is how do I move myself to a place where I really care and get other people to really care and take action to benefit it. So it's not, when I do a project, it's not just about me or about my client, right? It's more seeing the project as a way to really help express the potential of the community or of the place, the watershed. And that's a very different orientation than has been typical in planning or development in the past.
Yeah. And there is also a very inspirational part of the book that is a place as a living system, and which is the role that we want to play in this living system, no? And then how we connect with others to play another major role is like a nester system, no? So act locally and impact globally. If everybody in our own communities, we came together, we understood our places as a living systems, we make actions or move forward to um, to change our patterns, our current issues that we have in our local places, then the whole planet will be a more healthy one.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a really different basis for creating the economy of a city or a region, right? Is by sort of seeing who and what it is and what it has the potential to be, and then figuring out how to have that be the basis for what you then create into the world, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone has to be able to contribute something in order to receive, exchange back. But how do we create that relationship of exchange based on something that improves the health rather than extracts and impoverishes, makes poorer and weaker every system of the planet?
Or competitive, no, instead of collaborative or cooperative.
Right. Yeah.
And there is another part that you talk about discovering the collective vocation, no, and this is related with people and with environment. What you will say to the future urban planners, urban studies, to understand the discovery of the collective vocation?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was just speaking to, that vocation is a really unusual but powerful way of thinking about, for example, urban planning. That Jamie Lerner of Curitiba in Brazil was one of the early people to use that term to describe his city. And what he said is every great city has a vocation, meaning every great city is being called to generate and contribute something to the world. And so vocation comes from something larger than me, right? It's where my culture or my community or my, the city that I'm part of is asking me to show up and grow who I could be so that I can help it become what it needs to be. So that's what a vocation is. It's calling from something larger than myself. And so to ask the question of urban planners, well, what is this city called to become, is a very different starting place for planning, right? And we all know about bike paths and, parks and, industrial zones, all of that kind of stuff, but none of those actually speak to the core essence of a community, of a city, and what the world needs it to bring into the world because of who it is. So it's a very powerful idea, very hard to get your head around, right? It takes a certain amount of humility and patience to hear that calling.
Definitely. And there is another term that is called co-evolving mutualism. Could you explain us a little, for example, in a city, where can we will be able to see a co-evolving mutualism, for example?
Uh-huh. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Curitiba a little bit. Your students are probably familiar a little bit with Curitiba. So they had a vocation of becoming, they wanted to really show what it meant to become a great ecological city. And they were one of the first cities to really take this on. And what's interesting is they were not a wealthy city. They were not a particularly powerful city. They weren't all that well known of a city, right? But they took that on as their vocation, that the world needs to see that it's possible to create a deeply, profoundly ecological approach to being a city. And so they had to evolve everything to be able to do that. They had to evolve the way the government works. They had to evolve their transportation systems. They had to evolve waste management systems. They had to evolve their business community. They had to evolve their relationship to the farming communities that fed the city. They had to completely change the way they managed their floodplains along the river and so on, right? So you have this, the city as a whole is trying to evolve something, right? To become something. And every member in the city is invited to evolve themselves to be able to make their contribution to that. Right? That's what we mean by co-evolving mutualism, that we all evolve together. right? We have a kind of sense of where we're trying to go, and okay, I'll figure this part out, and you figure that part out, and we'll get the transportation people to figure that part out, and we're not treating those as silos. We're weaving them together so that this total system, this total vocation can be expressed. Make sense?
Yeah. Maybe came to my mind other cities like Singapore or maybe Sydney, Australia, who are really focusing in moving forward to a more ecological city with more healthy systems.
Yeah. So one of the key things to make it co-evolving mutualism is, how do you invite your citizens into that process? How do you invite your businesses into that process so that they can so that it's not all driven from the top down, that it's actually growing at the same time from the grassroots up. And then it becomes a co-evolutionary process.
Exactly. And then move forward to goals and to guidelines and to take actions in different levels, no? Nested. A little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. And then in the final part of the book is about the transformational leverage, and then it's like you say, no, like how can we collaborate and make networks or make nodes or make to float to that direction, no? And there is another aspect that you speak about, recognizing the nodes, no? It reminds me also like the Chinese acupuncture, no? The body as a system, and in acupuncture you identify the nerves or the nodes that are the key points to touch in order to shift or to transform tension in some part of the body. No? So in a way, the cities also have these acupuncture actions that can transform or impact widely. No, I don't know if you would like to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, what I would add to that thought is, it's very easy to see that in material terms, right? And in almost any city, you can see it. What are the really symbolically important places, right? The plazas and where the river is, and where this is, the church that was, created at the founding, or the ancient pyramids, or whatever it is, right? And so those often are nodes. They're places where a lot of people pass through or are connected to it, a lot of different influences, and a lot of meaning for people. But they're also sometimes non-material nodes. Right? So being able to being able to figure out what is the true vocation of this community. What is the thing that would call everyone to want to work together to create the future that we can see, that is the right future for us? That's a nodal intervention, right? To be able to take that out of this kind of vague, unconscious background and bring it forward and be able to tell a powerful story about it is transformative for a community.
Exactly. And then you need to work with community. You need to do participatory methodologies. You need to talk to the people. You need to gather together.
Yeah. So the nodal intervention might be a physical project, right? Or a placemaking kind of exercise. Or it might be something that's much more about speaking to the essence and raising up the deeper vision of the community.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ben. It was a very nice talk to you. It's a pleasure to talk with the author of this wonderful book that definitely all schools, especially in urban planning, in urban studies, should have. And thank you. It was an honor to have you this morning, and all the best for this year.
Thanks, Sergio. It's a real pleasure.
Well, thank you very much.